Hello there, and welcome to Trek Prime, episode 21.
Ooh,
And this is Jeff's week, and he brought up something that, I had to do a little soul searching about this topic because of where it might lead, but I'll let Jeff explain a little more about it and why I decided that it would be a good thing to go with after all.
okay. Yeah, I wanted to like kind of have a discussion or theorize discussion about, how what might have happened to the Romulan people after their homeworld was destroyed. I realize that goes back to, the J.J. Abrams movie, but they had
And
that
I guess
one little piece of that story was actually prime real estate, that we
exactly
exist on.
that's why I
So we
decided.
can't we can't really ignore that because that was the only
Right.
connection
Yeah,
to our Star
it's
Trek world.
there, so it's
Yeah, it has to be addressed. So I was thinking, well, now that we know that happened, what could have happened to the Romulan people? Did they become more xenophobic? Did they unify with the Vulcan people, to save whatever they could of themselves, or what, or were they conquered by the Klingons? Anything. What might have happened to them? Where could we go? Because see, when we talk about that, we can talk about, if they ever do another Star Trek series that takes place after Nemesis and after that little incident in that movie, they can introduce these things into that series, as to what might have happened to the Romulus or the Romulan people rather, and that's
that's
a thing
the
they can pick up.
that's just that's an idea. Of course, that it's fan fiction fodder anyway, so probably already been done.
It's definitely something there that can work with. So,
Do you want to, since it's your video idea, do you want to discuss an idea you had first?
okay, well, I had an idea, but it's drawing on the last episode of Next Generation, and I realize that it was a Q kind of setup thing, but at the same time, we're dealing with timelines. And I think what Q did was kind of showed Picard a possible timeline that could go into if things keep going the way they're going or something like that, if they don't change anything, which apparently they did, because when we lost the Enterprise D and we have an E, so they're already on a different timeline heading off, and but from there were some elements that seemed to like kind of make a connection to what happened later, all these years later. They didn't really say much about, what happened to why the Klingons conquered the Romulan people in that future, in all good things. But now we have a possible explanation that maybe that the Klingons, after the Romulan homeworld was destroyed, maybe the Klingons felt this is the time to get rid of one of their biggest enemies, to just go in there and take over whatever they can of their empire. And maybe that drew the Federation's disgust and said, no, you don't do this to, you don't kick a person down when they're when they're you just, so they're kind of like, we're not going to support this. And that maybe that ended a treaty with the Federation and the Klingons, and so that probably explains why there was tensions going on at that time. Again, it's not exactly like the timeline, but it's kind of drawing a little bit off of it a little bit. That maybe something of that timeline is still going to happen, even though it's a different version of it. Because you have an Enterprise D that's modified in that timeline, where instead we have Enterprise E now. But maybe some things in that timeline did happen, regardless of what Q did or didn't do. So I thought maybe that would be a good way to take something from the Next Generation and a little bit from the movies, and then kind of connect it all into a path.
I must say that, just for an aesthetic purposes, I mean, what you say about the timeline is correct, because I kind of look at Star Trek as being a hopeful future. I would like to hope it doesn't go that way, just for my own
Yeah,
personal
yeah,
reasons. Because, we kind of did that a lot in Deep Space Nine, kind of, made everybody angry with each other. And, I kind of would prefer if they didn't go that way on an aesthetic level, but it would kind of fit into that All Good Things universe. Although I guess I don't really count the All Good Things universe as anything, like you said, anything,
solid.
binding.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah,
But like I said, it's a possibility.
yeah,
And it's plausible that the Klingons might do that, especially after the Dominion War and the depletion of resources. I
hmm
just don't per se want to see that myself.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean,
because
it could be. I mean, it may not even be that big of a thing. I mean, they could say like, well, there was just a little bit of a skirmish between the Klingons and the Federation about it, but they settled it amicably, and they decided not to continue.
right.
You know what I'm saying? Maybe they just, with Worf's help, Governor Worf's help, maybe.
I'm saying it's a good idea. I'm just like I said, I just wouldn't want them to per se go that way because if Star Trek's already failed going that way in the past,
Yeah.
made it too dark. But that's a possibility that could happen.
Yeah,
I
it
mean,
doesn't have to be a main theme. It could be just a story element, or something like that.
but yeah, it is plausible. Although, like I said, the all good things thing. But another idea I had, and I don't know if but it is something that did happen. We were hinting at it. Spock was working on this with the Vulcans.
Mm-hmm.
Was the idea that after Romulus was destroyed? Now, obviously, one thing I think we both know is that is not, and I mean not the end of the Romulan people.
No, it isn't. No.
Romulans, I'm sure, because of the nature of their species, the Empire, they probably have a lot of colonies. There's probably multiple Romulan homeworlds.
Yeah, and they got ships everywhere. So yeah, I mean, there's
right. So I mean, they destroyed the Romulan homeworld. A good chunk of Romulans were destroyed, but I don't think by any means the whole race was.
Yeah.
Another theory that I had was that, and of course this is a little bit of a different focus, was that in the 24th century, Spock was already working with the Romulans on a reunification idea, which at that time didn't quite pan out because of the Romulan-Klingon conspiracy of that time.
Yeah.
The Duras sisters and all that business, and Sela and Pardak's involvement. But what happened, what I theorize would happen, is that the events of Romulus being destroyed is that the Romulans would probably be lacking in resources to a certain degree from that.
Yeah.
I imagine. And they would, and my theory is they would turn to the Vulcans for help because the unification process was already underway. And the Vulcans and the Romulans wouldn't necessarily become the same species again, but they would become allies, and that would draw the Romulans closer to the Federation, and a new peace, perhaps even more powerful than the Klingon Federation alliance, would be achieved. That's one possibility. Another possibility I had of that future.
Yeah.
That, that, and that's based on something that was in an episode that is not an alternate timeline. So that's just my theory about it.
But it could dovetail into Spock's, his goal of trying to bring the two races.
Right, exactly, because
actually happens.
He died.
Not there, even though he's not there to actually see it happen. It does happen. He got the movement going, and after the destruction of Romulus, a lot of the hardliners are gone, and maybe they're more open now to try to reunify just for the sake of saving their people. And that happens.
And I mean, of course, in that movie, I don't want to delve too much into the Abrams timeline, obviously, but we had in the Prime universe, we had Romulus destroyed. In the alternate timeline, we had Vulcan destroyed.
Yeah.
And I'm sure in that alternate world, it's going to affect the balance of things, of course. But like I said, there are still Vulcan colonies and stuff like that. But in the Prime universe, let's get back to that. Go away, Abrams.
In a way, what's happening on the Abrams is actually the reverse of what's going to happen in the Prime timeline. You know what I'm saying?
Maybe it's the mirror universe. We don't even know it. No.
Yeah, maybe.
anyway, I'm just saying, I knew this was going to happen. I knew we get into that element of it. But it's just how it goes. It was created, it happened, and it's in the Prime timeline. That's just my theory. Now, to add to your Klingon thing, I don't know if the Klingons would like it very much, unless something changed, if the Romulans and Vulcans and Federation unified into a stronger alliance with each other, if the Klingons would find the so the Klingons might still have a problem with that.
Yeah, they may not be as distrusting of the Federation as they used to be, so they might warm up to the idea a little better than they have.
Well, that's an optimistic way of looking at it, and that's just me. We've discussed this about this. When I go to Star Trek, like I said, there are parts of Deep Space Nine, I'll be perfectly honest with everybody out here, I just don't go to because they're too much like a lot of TV today. It's like, let's tell the saddest story possible. Like, what did General Chang say? Tell us your sad story.
Yeah. Well, we have to see some evolution in the way Klingons think at this point.
Exactly. I don't want to see the Klingons the same old idea.
After all the thing, they went through the Dominion War together. They had all these things they dealt with together, for all these years under the Next Generation. I think the time has come now where the Klingons are going to have to say, well, maybe some of the things we thought about the humans was wrong, and so maybe we can trust them a little better.
I would love to see. Yeah, I'd love to see things get even better in the future.
Yeah.
You know, I'd love to see things even get, because we had all that conflict stuff, you know, like we had in the 23rd century. We had the Klingon Wars and the 20-year
Yeah.
wars and the
I mean, even though
Axanar
Deep
and all
Space Nine was what it was, when it ended, it kind of left a hope there that maybe the Klingons and the Federation were going to be stronger allies from that point on after they'd gone through all that
that. Right,
war.
because they went away from the Khitomer Accords for a little while, then they came back, and
Yeah.
they got tighter.
Yeah.
I mean, and who knows, you know, I mean, who knows what will happen to the Cardassians in the future? Who knows how close they'll get to the Federation in the future?
Yeah. I mean, even that, or Cardassian and Bajor, I mean, they might unify themselves, you know, to trying to kind of repay for what they've done, you know, and now they're just
Well,
working
you
together,
know, you
maybe.
just reminded me of the fact that in the mirror universe, the Klingons and the Cardassians and the Bajorans came together.
Well, maybe it will happen in that, but it won't
But in a
be
better way.
a devilish way. It'll be something, you know.
Right? It won't be in that mirror way.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
it'll be more, you know, I would love to see more alliances happen and stuff like that. It would just be kind of cool to see these interacting and
things are always changing in Star Trek, and they have
right.
to continue to change as it goes.
And develop new subspecies. Like, it would be really cool to see Cardassian Klingon hybrids.
Mm.
You know, if we have Klingon human hybrids, it would be interesting to see, or Klingon Bajoran hybrid species. It would be interesting to see these new spin-off species.
Yeah.
Or maybe even a Klingon and Romulan, you know, connection. It would be interesting to see these things happening.
That's right.
Just to kind of grow new subspecies,
because when you change the field, you're also introducing new story elements, new things to explore, you know.
Right. So that was my one of my ideas. So I think we pretty much discussed that pretty well. What's another idea you would have aside from the Klingon thing?
As far as the Romulans go, yeah, I'd like to see the reunification happen. That's for sure. And maybe learn a bit more about how it all started. You know, maybe some kind of like maybe like a backstory. You know, about, you know, because I mean, they did it in books. They did like stories about how the Vulcan planet, you know, kind of fragmented and certain people left and, you know, and stuff like that. They've done it in books, but I'd like to see them actually do a backstory a little bit, just to show how it ended and maybe kind of draw a circle to say how it all kind of goes right back to Vulcan, you know, and maybe the teachings of Surak in the future, where Romulans actually come back, and maybe it was kind of shown in the teachings of Surak that maybe these people would leave, but they would come back and they would finally embrace peace and stuff like that, and, you know, put aside their, you know, evil ways, as it were, you know, or something like that. I think that would be kind of interesting to see as like a Vulcan Romulan story in a new Star Trek series, you know, maybe just to see how that would, you know, how that would all play out.
Kind of an offshoot without the Federation being too involved.
Well, no, I mean, you could do like a story about it, you know, maybe, you know, something to do about a Romulan person, you know, coming back to Vulcan, you know, maybe like one of the people that was so adamant against having that unification finally having to come to grips that maybe it's got to happen in order to see.
Change of mind, basically.
Yeah. And maybe he was like really against Spock, you know, and now he's starting to see that Spock was right, that was the only way, you know. And so, you know, it would be kind of nice to kind of do like a little story about that, you know.
Well, you know, another idea I had actually also goes with a speculative future, but although it was not a speculative future at all, it was created by some alien. The whole idea in Future Imperfect, if you remember, an alien created this future of a Riker, in which the Enterprise rescued a Romulan ship, and the Romulans somehow were very grateful, and they started to talk. And
that kind of happened in Nemesis. Remember when they was fighting in the at the end, when Picard and the other three ships had to help each other to try to repair their vessels somewhat, you know?
Yeah, that's why I wondered if between unification and the events of Nemesis, if a Federation Romulan alliance wasn't already kind of brewing a little bit.
Yeah, I think
there wasn't some kind of new piece developing, and maybe the destruction of Romulus might have been like, now we need to really start seriously talking now. So
yeah.
My other theory was that never mind the Vulcan unification at all. What if, you know, Romulus being destroyed forced the surviving Romulans to come to the negotiation table and actually do this? Because we mentioned this with Klingons. You know, you can't really deny that perhaps the destruction of Praxis began the long process of the Klingon Federation alliance.
Exactly. Yep.
Because they were short on resources, and they needed to, you know, broaden some of their ways of doing things.
Yeah.
And they knew the Federation might give them that, and you know they struggle with it. But it'll be interesting because, you know, we've explored a lot about Klingons, but usually they're in stereotypes. So the Romulans, for a species that's so big and star, we really don't know a whole lot about them.
That's right. We
They
don't.
live in a covert society. They may have some very beautiful elements of their culture, like Vulcan, we don't even see.
Yeah.
They might have some very beautiful ideas. There might be some very strong pro-peace activists on Romulus we just don't see. I mean, the Romulan Empire, you know, and we've seen even people in the Romulan Empire have very sublime sides to them. So there is that Vulcan sense in them somewhere.
Yeah.
Where they're, and even in the Vulcans, if you remember, a warrior. This, I take it that even if they were very emotional, the Vulcans must have always had a reasonable sense somewhere. So I'm thinking, you know, maybe the Romulans just draw on that more, and you know, they just find a new way for their society to grow. You know, they can still keep their space fleet or whatever if they want. They don't have to just mothball and go into Starfleet.
Yeah.
But they could just, you know, find another way of being. I don't know. I'm just saying that, you know, but they don't need the Vulcan reunification to make everything okay. You know, they could just look at the Federation like the Klingons did. And of course, again, that would probably force a Klingon-Romulan alliance to a degree because the Klingons would be there.
Yeah.
I have a vision in the future that there'd be more than just Worf in the Starfleet Academy.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, for all I know, in the future, we don't know about, the Klingons might just flat out join the Federation.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, they were allies. And that goes to my theory. Perhaps in some future we don't even see here, the Romulans could just flat out join the Federation, just mothball their empire.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I mean, I don't know if they could sustain it without the Romulus being there.
Yeah.
Which brings me to another theory. But I want you to go next because I have another one that kind of goes back to Nemesis. But you go first.
The other theory, and I don't like it, and I know you're not going to like it, but the other theory, and it's in today's world, it's probably more likely to be this way than the way we're talking, is that it just makes the Romulans more vindictive, more xenophobic, and they'll just withdraw, and they'll be like, you know, these shadow pirates that just come out and start raiding colonies and stuff like that.
You know, it's good you mentioned that because, and I'm not being malicious here, but that's the way I think a lot of the Star Trek writers today would do it, frankly.
Yeah,
I think they would take the darkest possible route, that it just made them meaner.
Yeah, and we wouldn't learn nothing new about the Romulans.
Right, which, like you said, you don't like it, I don't like it, it's not Star Trek, but, you know, I could see writers today, like, that conflict thing, we gotta have that. So, yeah, that is an idea.
I mean, that's what's selling right now, is this gloom and doom thing, end of the world and all that stuff.
That would be the more, I would say that'd be more cynical route, not that I'm saying, you know, you're being cynical about it, but that would be a more cynical route. Like, they didn't learn anything, you know, history teaches you nothing, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
You know, just that hopelessness. But that would be, that's a possibility.
Yeah.
Another possibility I had, though, is based on Nemesis, you know, another kind of gloomy movie, but the fact of the matter is that I had another idea that sort of involved unification too, but not with Vulcans, but with the Remans. And the reason why I mentioned the Remans is because we really don't know a lot about how the Remans became involved with the Romulans. We mentioned this before, I think in an after show once. We just for you audience, Jeff and I often talk after our podcast. We call it an after show. I call it an after show. It's not really an after show. We're not on NBC late night, but
late night.
It's like an after show. We talk to the people when the cameras are off. But anyway, we were talking about in one of these situations about how the Remans don't look a thing like Romulans. And I had the idea that Romulans, as an empire, had subjugated these aliens that lived on that planet. Like, you know, you occupied this world. We're taking over this planet now. When they first left Vulcan or whatever they did, so you know, you guys gotta go over and live on that other planet. So we'll be Romulus, you'll be Remans.
I guess their planet would be gone too, wouldn't it? Because it's right next door to the Romulan.
Well, you know, I don't know. You know, they didn't say anything about Remus.
Yeah.
I don't know if Remus was destroyed, but if Remus wasn't destroyed, I had this idea that the Romulans that remained, would want to colonize a new planet, but the Remans would be like, nah, you know, you enslaved us. We don't really like you too much. But if you're willing to talk with us, we might be willing to share our planet with you.
I mean, they did kind of work with the Romulans during the Dominion War, so it's not like they'd be closed to the idea of trying to work with
They
them.
did. I don't remember any mention of the Remans during Deep Space Nine.
Yeah.
There was?
No, I don't know. I don't know. Remember if they ever mentioned them, but
We never saw the Remans until that's on Nemesis is what I was going to say.
I think on Enterprise they showed Remans on an episode of Enterprise.
Oh well, yeah, in the past.
I mean, this was after they did Nemesis, of course, so they had to introduce this again. You know, just
right, because they did Nemesis in like I think it was first, second season of Enterprise.
Yeah, so they had to kind of back it up, you know, by putting, you know, but yeah, I mean that would be interesting, and you know, it also, and I'd like to know how, you know, how in the hell did the Remans build this big friggin' spaceship and nobody knew about it until
we can do that in a Nemesis video if we do one in the future. How these inexplicable Reman things happen.
Yeah, I mean, obviously they got some engineering expertise there that you know the Romulans don't have. If they were able to build
about Remus that hasn't been told. Yeah. You know, like I always suspected, like I said, the Romulans probably conquered that world, and we're going to subjugate you and have you be a reservation on that planet, use with slave labor. But my other possibility is that, so yeah, the Remans like, well, you're welcome to share our world. We don't let you conquer it, but you can come down here and we can talk. So the Romulans and the Remans might unify.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know how the Remans are with the Federation. I don't know if they have any relationship with them.
Yeah.
I mean, they never really went into the Reman culture that much.
No, they didn't.
Unless they treated them like they were just a slave labor fodder.
Yeah, they were the brute force of the war basically during, like, what was it they called? They were cannon fodder, something for the Romulans. Yeah.
So like I said, but the Remans, you know, I don't know if they were a warrior culture or something else. I don't know what their culture was actually like. So, you know, that's another possibility that there could be a Reman Romulan unification after that, and that could, unless, like you said, the Remus was destroyed in the same way.
Yeah, I always got the impression the two worlds were like kind of close together or something like that, you know, because like when they showed in TOS, when they show Romulus and Remus on the star map, it looked like they were kind of right next to each other somewhere, you know. So
okay, what's another theory you have?
Another theory? Okay, well, let me see. I would like to see, you know, or maybe a theory they could go with it is that the Romulans actually just come to the Federation and say, look, we need to find a new world for our people, and can you help us? Basically, they kind of come to the Federation with their hats down, just seeing how, because remember
didn't I just have that idea though?
Well, I mean, because at the end of Nemesis, we saw that, you know, they kind of opened the door a little bit to cooperation.
Right,
and then by the series, you know, when we do another series, now we see that the Romulans are actually coming to the Federation on their own now. They're not just waiting for the door to open. They're actually taking the initiative to say, we need some help, and, you know, the Federation and the Romulans are more trustworthy of each other. And so you'd see the series where maybe you'd have like a Romulan you know, crew member or something, or, you know, where part of their mission is not only to explore the unknown, but actually to find a new world for the Romulan people to colonize.
So okay, and so you're saying that there could be a Federation thing, but rather than, you know, just remaining in their colony, the Federation could actually help them find a new world to.
Yeah, as they push out into the stars, they could probably find something.
Okay, you know, I'm almost out of ideas, so I'm picking up on an undercurrent here. You know, because you were saying that idea about the Romulans becoming more aggressive, you didn't like it, and you knew I wouldn't like it. So obviously, those aren't favorite options of ours per se.
Yeah, because it's not like a big surprise. The Romulans are going to, you know, it's like, no, why can't we have surprise? The Romulans are going to be peaceful now. I mean, wasn't that kind of like when Next Generation, when everybody's saying the Klingons aren't going to be the enemies anymore, it was kind of like surprise. But if they'd have came back and said, oh, the Klingons are our enemies still, it's like, okay, so what's going to be the draw, you know, for a new season?
Again, you know, even if there are allies, you can't tell me there aren't going to be challenges in that.
Yeah, there's going to be strife.
I mean, it's not all like instantly sweet and rosy, you know. And which brings me, and I wanted to talk about this with you, and you know, and this is just one thing, because I don't want to use the term lazy, because I'm not really liking people who are using the word lazy a little too much these days.
Yeah,
it gets to kind of be discriminating, and so I'm not going to use that word lazy. But I'm going to talk about, I guess the word would be obvious writing. Let's use that word, obvious.
Predictable.
You know, it just sounds better to me than lazy at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, because if you know how things are in the world, people accuse people they don't like for whatever reason are just being lazy.
Yeah.
You know,
'Cause
without
because they're not agreeing 100% with the way you're thinking or something.
right. So
You're being lazy.
it's just it just gets But anyway, so yeah, obvious writing. And you mentioned that with that whole thing with the Romulans being more aggressive. That would be a very easy thing to write, really.
Yeah, it would be exactly what I would expect from today's writers.
I think Picard said something once, or I heard it in Star Trek somewhere, but I certainly got it out of Star Trek. And it's the idea that sometimes it's a lot easier to have an enemy than to make the effort to make a friend.
Yeah.
And, we see that a lot in the world. I don't like you, let's kill you, let's go attack you.
Yeah.
And, with Star Trek, one of the key elements is the attempt to try to, seek out strange new worlds and new civilizations and make peaceful interactions with them. And as you can see in Star Trek, that's very difficult and requires a lot of effort. But there's always an attempt to try. So I think the most biggest challenge they could face was to have that, because I'm sure there are issues the Romulans and Federation would see at odds, but you have to actually work a lot to make peace happen.
Yeah.
That's why I think sometimes a lot of people don't want to do it, because you have to do a lot of hard soul searching to make it work. And the Federation might not always be right.
Yeah.
And with the Romulans, they may have to face that. Sometimes the Romulans may have a point.
Yeah.
I mean, we saw in Star Trek 6, when the Klingons were talking to the Federation, it wasn't like they didn't have points.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it's probably a slip up on Chekhov's part, but it may not have been. He was talking about everybody in the species, everybody in the galaxy having access to inalienable human rights, in which she was Gorkon's daughter, Azibor, is that how it's pronounced? Inalienable human rights. This very name is racist, If you could only hear yourselves, this is a Homo sapiens only club. Not an invalid point.
Yeah.
It did seem like, there are just a lot of it is because you don't like us for being a little different than you. And I mean, they have other aliens in Starfleet, but it's like just that phrase "human rights" does sound a little bit, racist, and literally so, because there's a different race.
That's right.
So I mean, I could go on and on about how weird the term racism is on our planet, since we're so very obviously from the same species. It's just cultural and climatic differences, but in that case, they are really a different race.
Yeah.
Their organs are in a different place. So, I mean, since Star Trek has never shied away from, dealing with cultural differences, why couldn't we, bring that out in a Romulan thing? Make it parallel to an event in today's world,
Yeah.
Talk about the Romulans and the Federation dealing with those differences, maybe in a harder core way than we do with the Klingons.
Yeah.
I mean, we saw the Next Generation, the Klingons were just all of a sudden allies, and that was it.
Yeah.
There was a little tension here and there, but we didn't see the process.
Yeah. They filled it in a little bit later, but
right. But it would be interesting to see the process of the Romulan Federation alliance.
Yeah.
We kind of were going away with Bajor, but it kind of went some other weird way. But I would love to see the process of that happen, and maybe Romulan exchange officers, and just seeing how things go, and because there's going to be conflicts that arise, but I would like to see how they arrive to a peace.
Yeah.
How the Federation negotiation process works, on a broader level.
And not through like mutual war, like what was done in Deep Space Nine, where and at the end everybody's kind of like hunky dory. I mean, actually show a legitimate process, not something.
Right, because that mutual war thing, that was basically like a World War II melodrama.
Yeah, it was.
World War II was mutual war, and it's like, oh well, we have to be hunky dory because we all fought in a war, so we all got to be with each other. What is the idea? Peace comes by the sword. I want to see something a little different than that. I agree with you. I want to see a negotiation process. You know who'd be great in this? Picard.
I was just going to say, I know who you're thinking of.
I mean, who in Star Trek is the most revered diplomat in the whole world?
He becomes an ambassador at some point. I mean, right?
That's been covered a million times. Ambassador Picard. He was an admiral in that Future Imperfect. He was basically their ambassador type figure.
Yeah.
He's always some guy involved in negotiation. That always ends up being where he ends up.
Yeah.
Being that, and that's natural. Ambassador would be a great role for him after captaincy. Because even as a captain, he was an ambassador. Yeah,
really. He had to use those skills quite a bit in the show.
I mean, just as a little side note here, my step grandfather loved TOS but he'd say, this next generation, they're sitting in the meetings all the time, you know? and you know, they're not all the time, but I mean, there's a point. They're in meetings a lot more, you know, because Picard is the negotiator, and he's always, you know.
It's about the story. It's not about the action. It's about
exactly,
the story,
but you know, that's just old school stuff.
You know,
I mean,
you
told me you dealt with that a little bit. Not you, but members of your family dealt with that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's like Star Trek is sort of like, you know, soap opera for sci-fi people, because, you know, if you watch you know, like my mother used to watch Days of Our Lives a lot. I mean, it wasn't so much action that was in the show. It was the story that was the draw that got people interested in these people. And so, in a way, I guess Star Trek kind of, you know, in a science fiction way, has used that same method in keeping its audience by creating a soap opera that takes place in the future in the sci-fi world of Star Trek. You know, so it's like, you know, this is our soap opera.
And I'm not criticizing Star Wars. Yeah, you can come over here a little bit, Star Wars.
Yeah.
But like I say, if you want the space western where they have a little success, but then they keep kind of running into the same situation every time, and there's constant conflict, you have that in Star Wars.
Yeah.
That's kind of what's happening over there, and it advances character development, but that's what Star Wars is, and that's, you understand Star Wars as being that.
Yeah.
But the comic's always going to arise in some way or another. But with Star Trek, there had to be a progression. That's just the nature of Star Trek.
Yeah.
You know, the Klingons, we know from the Next Generation, they don't have to keep being at war with the Federation. I mean, with Deep Space Nine, they took a little bit, but, you know, we'll save that for another time, because I was thinking of just doing some Deep Space Nine related stuff, because there's a lot I have to say about that.
Yeah.
Not all bad. I'm just saying there's some things I have to say about that, because Deep Space Nine brought up a lot of questions about the writing process of Star Trek and just general that. I have a lot of things to say about it, because it's probably the most complicated and difficult to deal with of a lot of the series. But anyway, in terms of the Romulan thing, I think, now that I think about it with you and I think that we both kind of are coming together more on the idea of the Federation and the Romulans starting to talk.
Yeah.
That seems to be a thing and I think inevitably that would be the most Star Trek-y choice to make.
Yeah.
It would be in keeping with the spirit of Star Trek, what the point of it is. And, you know, the idea is not, like you said, peace through war.
Yeah.
Because Deep Space Nine already kind of did that.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I mean, that's something we do more in our time, but I like to think that humans, and they've said it, have evolved beyond the need to solve every problem with a physical conflict.
I mean, if they were to do a Star Trek like The Next Generation today, that would be sort of radical compared to what's been done recently in Star Trek. You know what I'm thinking? You know,
well, yeah. I mean,
about it. You know,
when you look at our times now, maybe we're not in very radical times. Maybe we're in a more reactionary time, and maybe people are reacting to things a little differently. Whoa, this thing about Romulus is really getting into a socio-political conversation about the modern experiences.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, Star Trek does that. You know, I mean, I don't know if you remember when I watched Star Trek 6. You know, and Nichelle Nichols mentioned this, that especially in Star Trek 6, I saw the Soviet Union and I think that was intended.
Yeah, yeah.
The Soviet-U.S. relationship, which was still, that was kind of ending around then when that came out, but it was still kind of hot in people's minds. Yeah. And, you know, I don't know if you heard this, but I heard people said that Praxis was an allegory for Chernobyl.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what they were saying even then. They were saying that. So yeah, I can see that.
Because you know that was the catalyst for the end of the Soviet Union, of course.
Yeah.
So you know you could see those parallels happening, and the prejudice on the side of the Federation about it, and Kirk's bitterness.
Yeah.
So you know, I imagine those kind of things could happen with the Romulans.
Yeah.
But you know, I'd love to see it play out, and love to see, you know, I'd love to see mistrust turn to love and cooperation.
Yeah.
You know, and, you know, I mean, it's Star Trek. You know, the Vulcans could be involved with a very simple thing, reintroducing the idea of Idic into the Romulan culture.
Yeah.
Kind of integrating it with, there's this thing on Romulus, I don't know if it's a greeting or if it's a symbolic word, Jolan True. I have no idea what it means.
Yeah.
It's a word that a lot of Romulans were using. I don't know if it's a reunification thing, but whatever it is, I'd love to see Romulan and Vulcan culture kind of blend together into some interesting new thing, and have the Federation trying to negotiate with the Romulans to make things work.
That's right.
It'll be that's so Star Trek. I mean, and you know, there could be little splinter battles from that. You know, maybe a person doesn't like the idea of peace.
Yeah.
You know, but I mean, like I said, that could all show, you know, oh, well, you know, maybe looking at it from this point of view, it's not so cool. We need to not be so obsessed with killing.
Yeah.
You know, I would love to see Star Trek go back to it. Yeah, you know, we're trying to make peace again with the universe. I would love to see it go back to that, because that Star Trek worked better that way.
Yeah.
Because it challenges writers. It's harder to make peace, and it's harder to write about making peace.
Yeah.
I mean, it's easy to say, I'm going to write down, let's fire a phaser and blow something up. I mean, that's a very obvious device.
Mm.
But to write characters and motivations, it's difficult. And you have to get inside yourself and the characters you're dealing with. And we see the Romulans are very complicated. Internally, there's a lot of overlapping ideas.
Mm.
And remember that Romulan in the Next Generation who defected?
Yes, the defector, yep.
Right, and he was Admiral Jarrock, and he was going through all this, you know, name, rank, and serial number, cloak and dagger. But when Data talked to him, he showed him this holodeck simulation of Romulus, and you started seeing this romantic side, this guy that had this romanticism about his home world, this guy who was concerned about the future of his children.
Yeah.
And the fact the Empire was getting too bloated and everything like that. So you can see that even in the Romulan Empire, there are internal doubts.
Yeah.
About it. So they're not quite like Klingons. There's an internal doubt.
Yeah, and you could even go back to that Balance of Terror when the Romulan commander had doubts.
Right.
About
He had some. So the Romulans, I don't think would be that difficult to deal with if you just, you know, because I think there's been doubt all along.
There is a certain logic to the way they think a little bit. You know, like it's not totally suppressed. You know,
right. It comes out in strategic thinking.
It comes out differently in them. So they have the ability to think logically if they would just do it. You know.
Right. So I mean, you know, who knows? A number of things could happen. This would be a really interesting thing to kind of go with in a new Star Trek project. What would happen in the Romulan situation? Yeah. So, is there any ideas you had other than what we've discussed?
Not really, but it's just to say that, you know, a lot of Star Trek fans, you know, they kind of figure that that's the end of the Romulan Empire, but I don't think it is. I think it's the beginning of
no. That's the first thing I would think it wouldn't be, because you're just destroying a home world. Doesn't mean you're destroying a race.
It's really
Romulans have colonies and ships out there.
It's actually a new beginning where we get to actually, like you said, we never really got to know the Romulans before in all the other shows that they made, but now we could.
Right.
There's so much going on with them as a people now.
Exactly. And with Nemesis, we could have gotten to know the Romulans, but they ended up being the device they usually end up being.
Yeah, it just got sidetracked by that
being a device.
It got sidetracked with the clone thing and the
Right. The Romulans ended up being a device of somebody else's story.
Yeah.
The closest in Next Generation we ever got to a really strong Romulan story was Face of the Enemy, because Troy was actually posing as a Romulan.
Yeah, you're right. That was.
Other than that, we didn't really get a good glimpse into. Unification kind of did a little bit, but then it veered off into Sela and just all that stuff.
Yeah.
We didn't really get a chance to see a good full description of what Romulan society was like. You know, what were the we get hints that we never get the whole thing. Yeah. I would love to see the Romulans explored as deeply. Yeah. I mean, I don't even know what kind of holidays the Romulans celebrate. I don't even know a lot about their basic culture, except the Empire.
Yeah.
Or with Klingons, we know about traditions, and with Vulcans, we know about traditions. Yeah. Romulans must have a shared culture that has their little things, and it's not just all about let's go out and play chess games with other races. You know.
Yeah.
There's more to this. These species, they obviously have complication.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
I mean, what would a Romulan marriage ritual be like? You know, how are Romulan children taught? What's the educational? What's all the stuff we know about Klingons? I mean, and even about Klingons, we don't even know that about them enough.
Yeah.
It would be interesting to see a little more about the Romulans and have them be brought up a little bit more.
Yeah.
And not just be a foil for somebody else's story.
Yeah.
I would love to see the Romulans, even Romulan technology. We know they use quantum singularities. I'd like to go into more of that.
Yeah.
For all we know, the Romulans are quite a bit more advanced in the Federation. We don't even know it.
Yeah.
Maybe they're hopping galaxies. I don't know. I honestly don't know what they're doing, because their society is covert. We don't know a lot about them.
Yeah.
I'd love to have that open up a little bit and see what happened. So, anything else you have to discuss? Because I'm pretty much.
Yeah, I'm out.
It's a pretty much a topic, I guess. So, until next time, episode 22. I have an idea, and I think it's going to be one easy because I often have ideas on this and I don't remember them, but I have an idea I wanted to go with. But until next time, live long and prosper, everybody, and peace.
Well, take care.
See you all next time.